Doha fell silent. The Qatari Emir Diwan announced what the region had long dreaded: the passing of His Highness, the late Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, at the age of 74. In the statement carried by Qatar News Agency, the Diwan spoke of a nation's great loss, a leader remembered not only for what he built, but for who he was, a leader who transformed his country into a nation whose voice resonated far beyond its borders. Across Doha, flags lowered, and 4 days of mourning period was declared, while across the Gulf, condolences began to arrive within minutes, from palaces and parliaments, from old allies and former rivals alike, mourning the life of the ruler who redrew the map of what a small Gulf nation could become. His Highness the Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, was born in Doha in January of 1952. He completed his early schooling in Qatar before making the journey to England, to the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, the same institution that has shaped generations of Gulf leaders. He graduated in 1971, returning home not as a prince waiting in the wings, but as an officer determined to modernize his country's armed forces from within. His rise was swift and deliberate. By 1977, at just 25 years old, he was named Crown Prince and Minister of Defense. Over the following decade, he quietly accumulated influence, chairing the Supreme Planning Council in 1989, the body that would shape Qatar's economic and social policy for years to come. On the 27th of June, 1995, the late Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani assumed the reign of power in what follows to become one of the most closely studied transformations in modern Gulf history. Almost immediately, he embarked on an ambitious program of national transformation. A permanent constitution was drafted and eventually put to the Qatari people, and the municipal elections were introduced. In 1996, the late Father Emir launched a broadcaster that would change how the entire Arab world consumed news: Al Jazeera, turning a small state's media outlet into one of the most recognized names in global journalism. Beneath the political changes, an economic revolution was also unfolding. Qatar's North Field, one of the largest natural gas reserves on the earth, became the foundation of a liquefied natural gas industry that within a decade made Qatar one of the wealthiest nations on the planet, measured by income per capita. It was, by any measure, a transformation few could have predicted, for a state once known mainly for pearl diving and modest oil exports. Wealth alone was never the ambition. In the years that followed, Sheikh Hamad set his sights on something longer lasting, a plan that would outlive the gas fields themselves. The late Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, oversaw one of the most ambitious energy expansion programs in the Gulf. Production capacity grew rapidly as Qatar invested billions of dollars in new extraction facilities, processing plants, export terminals, and an advanced maritime fleet capable of delivering liquefied natural gas to markets across Asia, Europe, and beyond. His government pursued a strategy built on international partnerships, bringing together some of the world's leading energy companies, while ensuring that Doha retained a central role in developing its own resources. These collaborations accelerated technology transfer, strengthen technical expertise, and help to establish the country as one of the world's most competitive energy producers. At the same time, Qatar's oil industry underwent significant modernization. Existing oil fields were also upgraded through advanced recovery techniques, refining capacity expanded, and investment in the downstream industries created greater value from the country's hydrocarbon resources. Rather than relying solely on crude exports, Qatar steadily diversified its energy portfolio to strengthen long-term economic resilience. The expansion of its energy sector transformed the country's position in global markets. By the early years of the 21st century, Qatar had emerged as the world's leading exporter of liquefied natural gas, supplying energy to dozens of countries, and becoming an increasingly influential player in global energy security. The country's reliability as a supplier earned it long-term strategic partnerships with major economies across multiple continents. During his reign, the revenues generated by this energy boom extended far beyond the hydrocarbon sector. They financed modern highways, ports, airports, hospitals, schools, universities, research institutions, and one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, providing Qatar with the financial strength to invest both at home and across international markets. Perhaps most importantly, the late Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, viewed oil and natural gas not simply as commodities, but as instruments for nation building. His vision was to convert finite national resources into lasting institutions, economic stability, and international influence, laying the foundations for a diversified economy capable of sustaining future generations long after the era of hydrocarbons. Qatar National Vision 2030 was unveiled as a roadmap toward a knowledge-based economy, one designed to prepare the country for a future beyond hydrocarbons, built instead on education, healthcare, and sustainable development. Education City rose from the desert outside of Doha, hosting campuses of some of the world's leading universities. Hospitals, research centers, and cultural institutions followed. Qatar's sovereign wealth fund, established in 2013, would go on to invest across the globe, extending the country's influence far beyond its borders. Among the boldest rule ambitions of His Highness the Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, was one that had nothing to do with gas fields or diplomacy. A dream to bring the world's most watched sporting event to the Arab world for the very first time. In December of 2010, in a moment that stunned the football world, Qatar was awarded the right to host the 2022 FIFA World Cup, becoming the first Arab and Muslim-majority nation ever to do so. It was the product of years of ambitious, unconventional investment that His Highness, the late Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, had championed as part of his broader vision to place Qatar firmly on the global map. The announcement set in motion more than a decade of transformation. Stadiums rose from the desert, new highways, a metro system, and an entirely new city at Lusail took shape. Qatar poured billions into infrastructure that would serve not just as a month-long tournament, but for generations to come. A legacy that Sheikh Hamad had long argued was about more than football alone. By the time the tournament finally kicked off in November of 2022, the vision first set in motion under the Father Emir had become reality. For millions across the Arab world, it was a moment of collective pride. The World Cup, at last, on Arab soil. And for Qatar, it stood as one of the clearest symbols of what His Highness the Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, had always believed, that a small state, given ambition and vision, could achieve what once seemed impossible. Among the reforms that would come to define Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani's rule, few carried as much lasting social weight as the doors he opened for women in Qatar. His democratic project began in 1996, when Qatar held the first elections for its Chamber of Commerce and Industry, an early signal of a broader push toward participatory governance. But it was in March of 1999 that the more profound shift arrived, with the country's first municipal council elections. For the first time in Qatar's history, women were granted the right both to vote and to run for office, placing them, for the first time, inside the formal political process of their own country. It was a milestone that extended far beyond the ballot box. In the years that followed, Qatari women moved steadily into spaces long closed to them, into universities and boardrooms, into diplomacy and the judiciary, into ministerial office. The transformation of Qatar extended beyond its borders. Under Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa's leadership, Doha's foreign policy became increasingly proactive, seeking to build bridges, strengthen alliances, and elevate the country's voice on the international stage. Among the defining features of the late Emir's leadership was a foreign policy that placed great value on strong regional partnerships. Throughout his years in power, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani worked to strengthen ties with fellow Gulf states, believing that sustained dialogue, regular consultation, and collective cooperation were essential to preserving regional stability. His approach reinforced Qatar's role within the Gulf Cooperation Council, while fostering lasting partnerships built on trust, mutual respect, and shared interests. Through every phase of that transformation, one relationship remained constant: the bond between Doha and Kuwait. The two nations share more than a border on the map of the Gulf. They share a history of standing together within the Gulf Cooperation Council, coordinating on matters of regional security, and upholding a shared belief that the strength of the Gulf lies in its unity. Over nearly 2 decades in power, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani was a familiar presence in Kuwait, and Kuwaiti leaders were regular guests in Doha. A rhythm of visits and consultations that reflected something deeper than protocol. It was a relationship built on family ties between the ruling houses, on mutual respect between two peoples who have long seen each other as neighbors in every sense of the word. That closeness has been visible again in these past hours, as condolences have poured in from Kuwait, official and public alike, mourning a leader many in Kuwait had come to regard not as a foreign head of state, but as a close and trusted friend of the nation. Such relationship was reinforced through continuous dialogue at the highest levels. State visits became regular occasions, not only for ceremony, but for strategic consultation, allowing both countries to coordinate their positions on regional developments and strengthen cooperation across political, economic, security, and cultural fields. Throughout the late Emir's tenure, Kuwait and Qatar consistently demonstrated their commitment to the principles of Gulf solidarity, whether through meetings of the Gulf Cooperation Council or bilateral consultations. Both leaderships emphasized dialogue, mutual understanding, and collective action as the most effective means of addressing regional challenges. The partnership also extended beyond diplomacy. Economic cooperation expanded steadily, while exchanges in education, investment, energy, media, and development reflected a shared determination to deepen relations in ways that directly benefited both nations and their peoples. Kuwaiti-Qatari relations have long been distinguished by their depth, stability, and enduring strength across political, economic, and cultural spheres. Guided by the wisdom of the leaderships of both brotherly nations, the two countries have consistently maintained a shared vision on Gulf, Arab, and international affairs, making their partnership one of the strongest pillars of regional cooperation. More than diplomatic partners, Kuwait and Qatar are bound by a relationship rooted in history, shared heritage, close familial ties between their ruling families, and a common commitment to advancing Gulf unity. Over the decades, this foundation has evolved into a model of integration and coordination, reflecting the aspirations of both peoples for greater prosperity, security, and sustainable development. The close bond between the two nations has been reflected in numerous milestones throughout their modern history. Among the most symbolic was the directive of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of the State of Qatar, to name the Sabah Al Ahmed Al Jabir Al Sabah corridor after the late Emir of the State of Kuwait, in recognition of his distinguished leadership and his historic contributions to the Gulf, Arab, and Islamic worlds. Stretching from the southern to the northern of Doha, the Sabah Al Ahmed corridor is one of Qatar's most significant transport projects. Beyond its strategic importance, the project stands as a lasting symbol of Qatar's appreciation for the late Emir's steadfast positions, his commitment to regional reconciliation, and the profound respect that he earned throughout the Arab and Islamic worlds. Institutional cooperation has likewise continued to deepen through the Kuwaiti-Qatari Joint Higher Committee, which has become the principal framework for expanding bilateral relations. During its fifth session, held virtually in November of 2020, both sides reviewed the avenues of cooperation, reaffirmed their commitment to greater coordination across multiple sectors, exchanged views on issues of mutual concern, and signed 5 memoranda of understanding covering a range of strategic fields. Economic relations have also experienced sustained growth over recent years. The launch of the direct shipping route between Hamad Port and Shuwaikh Port in August of 2017 significantly increased bilateral trade, ensuring the uninterrupted movement of goods, particularly food supplies and essential commodities. This momentum was further strengthened by the signing of a 15-year agreement in 2020 for the supply of liquefied natural gas to the state of Kuwait, covering the period from 2022 through 2036. Today, growing trade volumes, expanding investments, and the presence of numerous Kuwaiti companies in the Qatari market continue to reflect the strength of an enduring partnership built on mutual trust, shared interests, and a common vision for the future. These shared convictions helped shape a relationship founded not only on common interests, but on common values as well. Successive meetings between the leaderships reaffirmed that the ties between Kuwait and Qatar were not confined to official agreements or diplomatic statements. They reflected a broader sense of fraternity, one rooted in shared heritage, mutual trust, and a common vision for a secure, stable, and prosperous Gulf region. Today, as Qatar bids farewell to one of the principal architects of its modern history. The enduring partnership that he helped to strengthen with Kuwait remains an important part of his legacy. It stands as a testament to decades of mutual respect, close consultation, and the unwavering belief that the future of the Gulf is best secured through unity, cooperation, and enduring brotherhood. If Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa's rise to power was swift, his departure from it was even more remarkable. On the 25th of June 2013, then Crown Prince Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani assumed the reign of power from his father, with the conviction that after 18 years, the country he had built needed a new generation to carry it forward. By then, Qatar had been transformed from a modern hydrocarbon producer into one of the world's leading exporters of liquefied natural gas, with a diversified economy, modern infrastructure, globally recognized institutions, and an increasingly influential diplomatic presence. The foundations that he had laid in education, healthcare, investment, media, and economic development elevated the country's regional and international standing, leaving behind a nation far stronger, more prosperous, and more confident than the one that he had inherited. His decision to transfer power voluntarily reflected not only confidence in the country's institutions, but also his belief in the importance of leadership renewal and continuity. By ensuring a smooth and orderly succession, the late Father Emir reinforced the stability of the state and provided the next generation with a strong platform from which to pursue Qatar's long-term national vision. In doing so, the late Father Emir, His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, became known simply as the Father Emir, a title of honor reserved to him respectively. In the years that followed, he remained a quiet but respected presence, attending national occasions, staying close to the royal family's inner circle, even as the spotlight shifted fully to his son. Tonight, as the Gulf reflects on the life of His Highness the Father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the scale of what he built is difficult to overstate. A nation transformed, a broadcaster that reshaped Arab media, a foreign policy that punched far above its weight, and a succession in 2013 that set a new example of how power might change hands in a region where it so rarely does. But perhaps what will be remembered most in Kuwait is simpler than any of that. The memory of a neighbor, a partner, and, in the eyes of many, a brother. As Qatar begins its period of mourning, Kuwait stands beside it, sharing in the grief of a family and a nation that had lost its Father Emir. A legacy stretching from 1952 to 2013 is remembered with admiration, respect, and gratitude. A legacy that transformed Doha from a modest Gulf state into a nation with a global voice, a dynamic economy, and an enduring vision for the future. Throughout his years of leadership, the late Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani championed a model of development that extended beyond economic prosperity. He invested in people, strengthened national institutions, expanded his country's diplomatic influence, and laid the foundations for sustainable progress, ensuring that the country's achievements would endure well beyond his time in office. His impact was felt not only within Qatar's borders, but also across the Gulf and the wider international community. Through the late Emir's commitment to regional cooperation, strategic partnerships, and balanced diplomacy, he helped shape a chapter of modern Gulf history, while fostering lasting bonds with brotherly nations, including the State of Kuwait. Today, the late Father Emir is remembered not only for the offices that he held or the milestones that he achieved, but for the vision he inspired and the nation that he helped to build. His legacy lives on in the institutions that he established, the prosperity that he cultivated, and the confidence with which Qatar continues its journey, guided by the foundations that remain firmly rooted in his enduring vision.